Good evening, everyone. Welcome to No Judgment here with Tish Ross, the podcast. I'm so glad that you guys are here. Man, I ain't even gonna lie. I just kind of slid in, and it's amazing when you have something so powerful, right? To share the goodness of God and to bring Him and honor Him, to give Him the glory. And I'm telling you that when that's great. That when I just kinda came on in, 5 minutes beforehand, all ready to go. Had to go on YouTube, y'all. Thank y'all for being here. Delete the original, link that I had up for this live. Poor Ashley, first time guest here. The link that I emailed her this morning, once I set up this live, no longer worked. And then I get in here, log in, log on, got everything reset, reshared on Facebook. New link added to YouTube, and she couldn't hear me, she couldn't see me. So we said a quick little prayer, and we know that God's got this. So thank you guys for coming in. I'm just going to say hello and welcome those of you that I see for right now, and then I'm going to bring Ashley in so that she can share her story. Hi, Tracy. Thank you, everybody that came from Goat Days Live. Thank you, Goat Days, for sharing and promoting this podcast. And if any of you guys have a platform that you wouldn't mind sharing, you never know what mom or dad or parent or child or adult suffering something similar to this, possibly now, maybe in the future. Maybe they know somebody that's going through something like this that needs to hear the goodness of God. So please, if you could share that, I would appreciate it. Hello, Goat Days. We love you too. There's Pretty and Pooch. There's Sammy, Tracy, James Hall. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you guys. Scotty, good to see you. Run on down. I'm going to just kind of scroll down super quick so I can get Ashley in. Echoes and Embers. Oh, thank you for being here. It has been a minute. It has. I just restarted last week. My podcast now is on Prospera TV Network, and this podcast will air here on my podcast channel as well as there. So it's reaching a lot of different people. I've got a lot of good feedback there. Thank you. Hi, Arlene. Thank you for coming in. I'm so grateful. Thank you for coming in to support Ashley and the podcast. I really do appreciate that. It's good to see you guys. Okay, well, I'm going to bring Ashley in. I've been going back and watching some of my intros, and boy, I talk a lot. So I'm getting out of here. I'm going to bring Ashley in and let her share her story. Okay. Thank you guys for being here. Again, please share. Here we go. There she is. Welcome in, Ashley.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I have been so excited to have you come on and share. And they had a little family emergency last week, but thank God everything is okay. And we were able to come on today. And so again, seriously, I go back and have kind of watched a couple of my podcasts. And I thought, my goodness, you talk so much. So I'm over myself. And so, Ashley, I want to bring you in and have you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself first. I always, too, like to ask a little bit about your childhood and how you were raised, what kind of family that you grew up in. Were you introduced to the Lord as a child? And then we'll move into your story about your son, Jace.
Sure. I'm 36 and I live in New Jersey. And yes, I did grow up in a faith-based household. I grew up going to a small Baptist church called Skullville Bible Church right in our town. Both my parents are believers and my grandparents were believers. And they really did instill the gospel in the home since I was little. Even in church, when I was small, I loved to sing. I always loved to sing in church. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to know the gospel as a young girl. And also, just being exposed to that gives you the foundation that you need when you go through trials like this that come up unexpectedly. You really you don't realize how fortunate you are to have had grandparents praying for you when you're young, and parents that really, make you go to church. And when you're little, you can think like, oh, it's a chore, but when you get older, you really appreciate
Yes.
everything that you learned and retained during those years when you were just a child and even a teenager.
Mm, that is so, so true. I thank God for the introduction or having the foundation being laid down to who Jesus Christ was, and then obviously ultimately developing my personal relationship with the Lord. But you're so right there. Even if I have strayed off the path, I just went right back to what my foundation was. So that is so,
Yep.
so true. So you have a story, a testimony about your son, and I'm going to let you just take it away and share all about the diagnoses, misdiagnoses, all your feelings, and then, as I had mentioned earlier, I'll interject if I see a question in the chat or if a question pops up in my head. Okay.
Sure. So back in December 2023, my 4-year-old at the time, Jace, started kind of acting a little bit off. His mood was changing. He wasn't eating as much. I have 3 children. I have an 18-year-old, a 12-year-old, and then Jace, who was 4 at the time. So nothing really was too out of the ordinary, really, for me to say, hey, like something's seriously wrong.
Mm.
But one night, it was Christmas Eve, Jace had trouble breathing, and he had some patches of what we now know are called petechia, little pinprick dots that are telltale markers that your platelets can be low. So we took him to our local emergency room on Christmas Eve. We passed the Christmas tree, loaded him up because he kept saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. So we drove as fast as we could to our local, I call it a glorified urgent care. It's a hospital, but they don't have the means to do blood work or anything like that at that vicinity. So when we had gotten there, Jace was, clearly having trouble breathing. So they brought him back and they examined him, and the doctor said, okay, he has croup. So they gave him a nebulizer to help him breathe. And they gave him a one-time dose of a steroid called dexamethasone. And they told us that in 3 or 4 days, that it's a kind of a long time acting one-time dose of that steroid. Mm-hmm. So he started to breathe better right after that dose. So we took him home. And what was interesting is as we were leaving past the nurse's station, Jace turned to the nurse's station and said, see, I didn't die. And I thought that was so interesting. Like, I'll never forget it. Here we are Christmas morning now, because we went on Christmas Eve. It's a little past 1 a.m, and we're headed home. The following day, we have Christmas. He could breathe better because the steroid opened him up enough to where he felt a little bit better, but the mood was he was still not feeling it. He was miserable, to put it lightly. And then the following day, which would be the 26th, he started to run a fever, a high fever, around 105 point something. So my husband, who works in Mount Laurel, I called him and I said, hey, he's running 105 fever. We need to do something. So we took him to the pediatrician, actually. And the pediatrician said, hey, everything's okay. He probably has a virus. Let's let it go, and see what happens. Just rotate Tylenol and Motrin, and it should go away. They ran a viral panel that nothing immediately showed. So the next day they would get the results of that. We had a different pediatrician at the office that day. Her name was Dr. Booker, and that will play into the story later on, which is completely insane. So we left the pediatrician's office and went home, and we rotated the Tylenol, the Motrin, and The next day, on the 27th, he still was not okay. He was running the almost 106 fever at this point. So I called my husband at work and I said, I don't want to play with this. Let's go to the hospital. And he said, which one do you want to go to? We could either go north or we could go south. And being he was at work in Mount Laurel, we chose to go to a virtual hospital, which is about 10 minutes from his job. So we both met there around, I'd say 2:00 in the afternoon. We went in, we saw the doctor. The doctor examined Jace. She said, okay, we're going to do a chest x-ray. They did a chest x-ray and she came back about 45 minutes later and she said, he has pneumonia. That's why he's not getting better. That's why he has the high fever. And you guys are going to have antibiotics and discharge papers within 15, 20 minutes and you'll be on your way. And we were happy with that. And about, I'd say a half an hour later, a doctor came in and she said, hey, I'm just popping my head in to make sure everybody did their job. She had a student with her. She said, I'm training and I'm not here because anything is wrong. I'm just here to oversee and make sure that everybody did their job, basically. Mm-hmm. So she took one look at Jace and she said, is he always that pale? And I said, well, he has blonde hair, blue eyes. Kind of. He's kind of, on the pale side. It was the dead of winter. So yes. And she said, well, look at his color compared to dad's color, referring to my husband. And I said, okay, what does that mean? She goes, do you mind if I get blood work? And we said, no problem, no problem. So they did the blood work. And 45 minutes later, they come in and tell us that they had to rerun the blood work because it came back strange. Still at this point, I'm not thinking anything's wrong. I'm thinking that somebody messed up in the lab, the blood was sitting too long or it was spun wrong because they didn't tell us anything. They just said that we have to rerun the blood. So they rerun the blood and they come back in, the original doctor that said he had pneumonia, the other doctor that was basically the attending, I guess, and the medical student, and they sit down and they close the curtain and they close the glass sliding door and they say, we think your son has leukemia. And at that moment, my heart just dropped. My husband threw up in the sink. He had French fries. In the time that we were waiting, he had French fries and he was eating the French fries and he threw up in the little sink that was in this small room. And my son Jace said, Daddy, what's wrong? And my husband said, it's the French fries, buddy. The French fries were bad. And it was awful. So, of course, I had a bunch of questions. Here I have these, two doctors and a medical student. I'm like, what do you mean he has leukemia? And of course, you don't know. All you hear is cancer and all you think is this is it. Yeah. Because you don't typically have a run-in with a child with cancer. So I was asking them, okay, are you sure? Are you sure that's what it is? And they said, we're pretty sure we have to transfer you to CHOP right away. So right away is not right away. Right away is the ambulance will be here in 4.5 to 5 hours. So in between that time, right after the doctors left the room, going back to, being brought up in a faith-based home and going to Sunday school and being involved in church and everything growing up, you don't realize how much of an impact that makes when you're in a moment like this. The interesting thing is I'd say a full year before Jace was diagnosed, I told my husband, I said, I feel like we need to get our affairs in order. I feel like something's coming. And of course that sounds crazy, but I had a feeling that something was coming. I didn't know what. So in the year and a half, roughly prior to Jace's diagnosis, my husband and I got baptized. We started going back to church. We had Jace dedicated. And me being a singer and loving worship, I started leading worship in our local church and learning tons of new songs and tons of new material. And I would go in our little shed that we have and I was very, very drawn to songs like I Am Not Alone by Kari Jobe, It Is Well, just Oceans, songs about going through trials. And I kept telling my husband, I don't understand what's going on, but I feel like, we need to get married because we weren't married. And I had kind of strayed from the faith a lot. So we got married. We got married in January, the January before he was diagnosed. And I hated January. I always hated January. But in that preparation season, I didn't realize it at the time. I thought that I was learning these songs to lead worship. I thought that I was, listening to all these sermons just because I had a thought, but it was not. So in that room, when the doctors left and we're waiting for the ambulance, my first reaction was to find the chapel. Find the nearest. Not that you have to go to a chapel to pray, but I left the hospital room and went and found the nearest chapel, which was a couple floors up, elevators up, and I went to the chapel and I just broke down. Luckily, there was 2 women in there that embraced me, and they were just angels. I mean, the one woman talked to me on the phone for hours that initial hospital stay at CHOP. So wow. Angels were in that room that night.
Yes, most definitely.
So from there, the ambulance took 5 hours, and my husband took the ambulance with my son, and I followed. And as he told me when we got to the hospital to CHOP, that as he was entering the ambulance, there was a woman that worked at that the hospital we were at, and she pointed to a poster on the wall, and she said, "Hey, that poster, that's my daughter." It was a grown woman on the poster, and she said, "That's my daughter, and she's a leukemia survivor." And that was the first little God wink that we had, that we knew that God was for sure, starting something. So we get to CHOP. We get to the emergency room. They have to run their own blood work. So they're jabbing Jace and finding veins, and it was traumatic. And we wait about 2 hours for the oncologist to finally come to the ER. So nothing happens quickly when you get to CHOP emergency room, believe it or not. So we're sitting there waiting to hear from the oncologist to see if they know anything. So he comes in and he sits down, and I'm like, here we go with the sitting down again. So he says to us, 75, 80% of the time, I'm able to come in this room and I'm able to say, based on the blood work, your child has leukemia. There's several different types of leukemia, but they're able to generally say your child has leukemia. He said, but with Jace, he says, I don't know what's going on because I looked at his blood under the slide, and that's what they do. They look at it under a microscope with their physical eyes, and they look for cells. If they're not popping up in the bloodstream, they look for cancer cells. And he said, I looked at your son's blood work, and I don't see any cancer cells. So we're going to go ahead and do the bone marrow biopsy, but we're not going to put chemo in the spine like they usually do as a first resort of treatment when they know you have leukemia. And he said, I'm going to ask my colleague too, in 6 or 7 hours to look at the slide as well and to get a second opinion. So Jace goes in for the bone marrow biopsy, and that doctor and the other doctor that laid a second set of eyes on his blood were sitting there. And before he was wheeled in for the bone marrow biopsy, I had a chance to ask that doctor. I said, hey, are you the one who looked at his slide again? Like, are you the second set of eyes? He said, I am, and I don't see any cancer. So at this point, we're thinking, great, it might not be cancer. So they take him in for the bone marrow biopsy, and about 15 grueling hours later, they come in and they say, okay, it's leukemia. We don't know what kind. Goodbye. We'll be back in 12 hours. So another 12 hours goes by, and they call us into the conference room because they have all the information. And they lay a book in front of my husband and I next to a mannequin that has a port. and all of the, wires going in for the port. And they say, okay, your child has B cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and we're going to have to start treatment today. And they tell us all the 17 or 18 chemos that he's going to get over the course of the next 2.5 years. And they make us sign on the dotted line. They ask us if we wanted to be in a clinical trial. And we said no. They didn't tell us what kind of clinical trial or anything like that. But they said that I asked them, I said, what do you expect for my son? Because you hear cancer and you think this is it. I said straightforward, I said, what do you expect for my son? And they both looked at me and they said, we expect this to be a chapter in his book and not the full story. And I'll never forget that. They said it was highly curable, but at the same time, it's a long and grueling process, and it does take 2.5 years. And basically, it works in levels. They start by trying to get your body into remission in the first month, and they do that by using steroids. And they went on to tell me that the first month, starting now, meaning starting in an hour, they were going to give him intrathecal chemo in the spine and start him on dexamethasone. And I said, why do you give dexamethasone? Like, what is it about that steroid? And they said, it's the only steroid that B-cell leukemia does not like. So it immediately starts killing the cancer cells. And that is why the oncologists were so stumped, because that one dose of steroid that Jace got on Christmas morning was already clearing the cancer out of his body. So they couldn't even see it, which I just cried at that moment, because I was like, that's the Lord. That's the Lord telling me that he had it before they had it. Like, and I needed that. Because I'm such an analytical thinker. So, I mean, it was so nice to have a little reassurance there that the Lord had this before we did. And I truly believe that that's why he couldn't breathe on Christmas Eve. I think that's exactly why we rushed him to that small little ER. And I think that the Lord knew what he needed at the time. So we went through the first month, and he was in remission, clinical remission. We found out he had favorable genetics, and at that point he had about a 95 to 96% survival. And we spent the next 9 months going through an intense treatment that every 4 to 8 weeks would get more intense and more intense. And we did this all the way through. And my son did wonderful through the treatments. I mean, we nearly lost our minds.
I was going to ask you, I hate to interrupt. I was going to ask you, during this time, there's a lot of people are saying amen, thank God. There's a woman here that says she had the bone marrow biopsy. Christy had the bone marrow biopsy. And then when you were in the chapel, another guest said you put the armor before the battle. You put the armor on before the battle. That was when you were talking about the songs that God was leading you to, and that you felt like you need to get married. And she said, you were putting the armor on before the battle. That's so amazing. And the same guest, Christy, she said that your husband, it's just amazing how parents just instinctually protect their children, because when he was throwing up, I was hearing something so devastating that he said, "Oh, it's just the fries. They're bad fries." It's parents and children are beautiful, and it's the truth. So my question is, during all of that, someone else even asked what I was getting ready to ask you. How did you prepare? How did both of you prepare Jace for all of this? Because one of the comments is, that is a big challenge for a child. How did you prepare him for the pain, or could you?
We did not. We didn't tell him anything. We didn't say, you have cancer. We don't. He was 4 at the time, so we were in the hospital initially for 5 days over over New Year's, we were there. I remember hearing the Happy New Year while I was in the bathtub listening to God is in this story.
Mm,
um, it was crazy. And outside of our bed, or not bedroom, but kind of bedroom, outside of our window of our hospital room, I saw a sign that said, "Tell, live, and be your story." So that's what I plan to do, was to tell the story, but not tell him exactly what was going on, because he wouldn't know anyway.
mm,
We luckily we were only in the hospital for an initial stay of 5 days. And that's also a blessing. That doesn't happen very often. A lot of times kids are in for a month, they're in for a few weeks. So we didn't prepare him, because we didn't know how to prepare ourselves. I
mhm,
mean, here, when we had to sign that book of all these chemos, it'll say 1 out of 20 kids will have this side effect. 1 out of 100 kids will have this side effect. And you see things on these lists that are sickening.
mm,
Um, just awful things. And you have to sign. And I remember, my last name begins with a T, so I would sign every page and cross it with the cross with
mm,
at the end, just because I was mortified. My husband and I were mortified of what was to come. And of course, these treatments go in stages, and every stage that we went through, including one where they tank his counts completely and give him a chemo called the Red Devil. It's called
mm.
doxorubicin, where they lose their hair, and they sometimes they can cry, and they can cry red.
Yes.
Um, I mean, if I just feel like the battle was so spiritual, um, that it just really was. It was an awful time, but to watch my son get these chemos and come home and ride his bike and not throw up and not have side effects. I mean, it was the Lord. It was the Lord. And I feel like my husband and I took it all. Like, we were dealing with the stress, but we would look at him and he'd be fine,
Mm,
but I mean, I can't tell you how many nights I didn't sleep. I can't tell you how many times that, I just didn't want to go on anymore.
mhm,
Honestly, quite frankly, I mean, I was suicidal at one point. And
mm.
this is like being a believer, going
Yes.
in my secret place and singing, and then screaming at the top of my lungs, "How could you do this? How could you do this to us?"
Mhm,
And I just remember, like, even during the initial hospital stay, like opening up the Bible and seeing, where Jesus healed the official son, and it said, "Your son will live," in red
mm.
letters. And
Wow.
I wrote everything down in a journal, every little thing that, was a coincidence, that wasn't a coincidence. I wrote it all down, because in those dark times, I had to go back and I had to refer to the things that the Lord had already done. Because if I were to look forward, I didn't know what was coming. We still don't know what's coming. Um, but another thing about that was so interesting is right before, or right after, I'm sorry, right after the doctors in that room told us what he had and they started the chemo, my phone rang, and it was the doctor from the pediatrician's office, Dr. Booker, the new
Mm,
doctor that I'd never seen before. And I answered the phone and I said, "Hi," because I thought it was, his original doctor. And she said, "Hi, Ashley, this is Dr. Booker. And I am just calling in to check on Jace." And I said, "Oh, did the hospital call you?" And she said, "No, why?" And I was like, "Well, Jace has leukemia." And she
mm.
paused, and she paused and and she said, "That's why I've been praying for him so much."
Wow.
And she said, "He's going to be fine." She
Mm,
said, "I've been praying for him and now I know why." And it just was another thing. So, our first clinic appointment, I was praying that we'd have a good doctor. for our first appointment because we were terrified of everything. And I got a text message that said, your first appointment is with Dr. Avajalu. And I thought, Avajalu, that sounds like strange, like sounds biblical. And I looked it up, and it means it's a derivative of Evangeline, which is the gospel or good news. So when we first went in to see him, I said, you're Dr. Good News. Do you have good news for us? And he says, I do have good news. And he had never heard that his name meant that. And you know what I mean? He never knew that. So in all his years of practice, he never knew that. But I thought that was interesting too. Yeah. So, I mean, Jace has been going through treatment wonderfully. I mean, and we just look at him, and his birthday is also 7/7 on a Sunday, which I think is amazing because, you know, the number of completion is 7. Never realized that. And his initials are JES, which I never realized before this. And, you know, when I felt that we were called to get married, I felt like, you know, the Lord just wanted us. I kept like feeling like the Spirit was saying, you know, you know, he wants us together. Like you need it needs to be us. And then that's when I saw that his initials were JES, and I'm like, plus us spells Jesus. I mean, there's so many, and people may think I'm crazy, grabbing for straws and such, but I do want to share about the envelope, because I think the envelope is so. I every time I think about this story, I mean, this is one of those moments where the Lord gives you something, and this is what I will hang on to for the rest of our lives. So during treatment, I hung on to Joshua 1:9, be strong and courageous. And I had a shirt that I would wear to clinic every week with that verse on it. And this is so crazy. So Jace, I even took a picture of him. He was pointing to Joshua in the Bible, and I took a snapshot of it. I thought, oh, that's cute. He's pointing to the Bible verse. I thought it was cute, so I snapped a picture. Well, a couple months ago, my husband and I decided to go to an Elevation worship concert, which was phenomenal, by the way. But it was our first time that we actually went somewhere without the fear of germs and without the, you know, we're in maintenance now, so treatment is less. And what was crazy is a couple of, I'd say about an hour or two before the concert, I had this crazy idea, because I love Pastor Stephen Furtick, that's from Elevation. I always listen to him. And I had this crazy idea to put Jace's face on an envelope, his picture, and just write a note inside, you know, about, could you say a prayer for my son in the arena? And maybe people would pass it forward. Maybe it would get to the stage. Maybe it wouldn't. Who knows? So we got to the arena, and I said, my husband, you know, saw me with this envelope and kind of just went with it at this point. So we went down to security guards led us down to the arena floor, and it passed through the hands. This envelope passed through about 3 security guards' hands as we were following them down to the arena, the floor. And finally we got to the bottom, and one of the security guards took the letter and was going to hand it to a staffer. And me being me, I was like, all right, no, I have to talk to whoever, you know, is going to have this envelope. I have to tell them, this is, you know, that's him. This is why. And this is, you know, this is what it is. So we followed the staffer over to the man who had the envelope. And I said, hi, this is my son. His name is Jace. I know the show's going to start in like 3 minutes, but if you could pass this to the pastor, I'm trying to get like an arena prayer going on for my son. I think it would be really cool. He has leukemia. And he stopped and he looked down at the envelope, and he said, I don't know where this envelope is going to go. I'm going to try my best, but I will be praying for him, because when I was 3, I had leukemia. And he was about, I'd say, mid-30s. And I said, do you remember anything? I was amazed. And I said, do you remember anything? And he says, nope. He says, no. I said, do you have any side effects? He says, nope. And I said, what's your name? And he said, Joshua. And that
Oh my
was
gosh.
it was amazing. And what was even crazier is that my husband actually wrote an email that morning, unbeknownst to me, that he had the idea that it would be cool to have an arena prayer going. So he emailed the church and a long email about how maybe they could say a prayer for Jace during the concert. So we had the same idea in a different way that led down an arena full of 13,000 people to this leukemia survivor, childhood leukemia survivor. I mean,
Whose
just
name is Joshua.
whose name is Joshua. I mean, and like I said before, I'm such an analytical thinker that this just completely blew my mind. I mean, here I am thinking that we need 13,000 people to pray for my son for him to be okay, and he just went above and beyond.
Wow.
I mean, that the odds of that.
That's
They're God.
overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I mean, I would have been a ball bag, just a mess. Because I think being analytical, yes, I am that as well. But you also know when God is so near and he's speaking to you and he is so present. And just even in just the little bit of the journey that we heard from you, I mean, you could just from the doctor and the student coming into the room, I mean, what are the odds of that? What are the odds of that? And him coming and saying, your son looks a little pale. I mean, seriously, someone had just commented chills because after they said Joshua, actually someone, the channel's name is Echoes of Embers and it says Joshua 1:9 is my staple too. Wow, that's amazing.
I love it. I love it.
Let me go up and read a few comments. So when you were sharing about that in the midst of this, you still have your faith, you still have your faith, but then, we are also human and we get angry, like what's going on? Why this? Why him? Why us? And I appreciate your vulnerability and your rawness and your realness, because a lot of people think that Christians or people that believe in Christ are these perfect people that everything's going to be okay, and don't ever get angry or don't ever wonder. I myself have wondered before God shared those little God winks, before our son was killed. And I just was like, but we were also, for lack of a better word, prepared a little bit, semi-prepared. Like, you said you knew something was coming and you were drawn to these songs. And then God, the Lord just said, you guys need to be a unit. You need to unite and it's time to get married. And just, my goodness, look at God and how precious he is in the midst of these, the Bible verse, it's in James, and, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you are in the midst of trials and tribulations. My goodness.
I have it written down, that verse. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that verse. Yeah. And you know what? How I didn't realize watching him smile, watching Jay smile, and watching him thrive in the middle of a storm. That's what consider it all joy means. Now what's crazy is when you have B-cell leukemia or any leukemia, you can have different levels and different stages, and there can be different treatments for it based upon your genetics, based upon your treatment response. So when Jace was diagnosed, he had a favorable gene, and he hit clinical remission. But like I said before in the beginning, we said no to a clinical trial. Now, we said no because we didn't know what the clinical trial was, and they didn't really explain much about it. But he would not have been really eligible for the clinical trial anyway, which was an immunotherapy drug called blinatumomab. blinatumomab, and it's a new immunotherapy drug that continuously runs the report, and it actively engages your T cells, which are your fighter cells, to attack the CD19 on the surface of B cells. Now, all B cells have some CD19 on them, but leukemia cells typically show CD19 on their surface, and Jace's also did. So in July, right before we had hit maintenance therapy, so there's frontline and there's maintenance therapy, which continues for about a year and a half. And that's oral chemo at home, clinic visits every 3 months. Right before we hit that point, the doctor said, halt, we have something new. They had figured out that the Blina trial was bringing kids, every kid, up to a 97% survival. So we were now taking high-risk kids that had 88% survival and boosting them to 96 or 97, 96.8 actually. And we were taking the average risk kids that had a 90% survival rate up to also 96, 97. And the reason that they weren't giving it to favorable kids was because they already had like a 96% survival, so they didn't believe that it would make a difference. But with Jace, what was interesting is they sat around the table and they said, we don't know if Jace would benefit from this Blina or not. We don't think that he will, because we think he's going to be fine anyway. But here's, you have the option to get it because they pulled the trial 2 years early because kids were doing so well with it, and now every kid was getting it. So the doctors were split down the board. They said, we don't think Jace needs it. It carries side effects. They can get cytokine release syndrome, probably familiar with hearing that from COVID. What can happen, the body floods basically with a bunch of antibodies and ramps up the immune system too quickly, and they can have seizures and strokes and neurological symptoms and everything. But they basically said, do you want it? Do you want it? It's 2 months broken up in between a 30-day period of oral chemo, and you have to be in the hospital for 3 days. And we don't think Jace needs it, but it's available to you. And the reason it was available to us was only because he had that 1 dose of steroid. So yes. So because he had the 1 dose.
How do you guys make that decision? I mean, you have these potential side effects, but
what was crazy
benefit from it?
Yeah. Well, what was crazy is this data that they had, they did not release it yet. So they put out the trial and they said, every kid's going to get it. But I said, where's the data? You know, me with my analytical thinking, what data do I have to look at? And they said, we don't have any. So I emailed about 10 oncologists across the country, and every single one of them basically said, we don't think he needs it. And they were basically split down the middle if he would benefit or not. Because Jace had below the level of MRD after induction, but he did have this teeny tiny amount, which was what the kids on the study were basically being trialed for, to see if the kids that had this eensy beensy little tiny bit below the threshold, if they would have improved survival odds, you know, over the course of 3 years, because they only had that much data. So after pressing the doctors, finally, I asked Dr. Good News, I said, if this was your child, what would you do? And he said, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. And I said, you know, what would you do, Dr. Nick? What would you do? I asked him like 3 times, and he said, I would rather never find out if Jace needed it or not. And about a month after we started the Blina, the results dropped, and they were phenomenal. So we were beyond thankful that he possibly got overtreated, you know, with this drug that now is showing to be so promising. And that was God too. I mean, he knows how much of a worrywart I am, and he knows the way that we think, and that's what's so cool. I mean, like with the envelope, he knew that the way I think with odds and statistics and logistics and, you know, what is the percentage of this and how many kids were in the trial. And then like, he just every single time just blows my mind. I mean,
Yes.
the church, the church that we're at now, I love our church. We're at Victory Bible Church in Hamilton, and even the little nuances. The year before Jace was diagnosed, I said I got to get him in. I got to get him in VBS. So we took him to a local VBS at our church that we're at now. And I said, I love this place. Let me take him to Sunday school in November. And I took him to Sunday school and loved it. Bam, he gets diagnosed. And I had called my old pastor and from our old church and in the hospital, and he basically, short and sweet said, "Oh, my sister had that, and good luck. Y'all be praying for him." That was it. Didn't call me, but I called our pastor from Victory Bible that I met for a week, basically, and he prayed with me. And him and his wife were just on the phone with me, and I'll never forget that. And I said that in my podcast last time, like, the fact that the Lord also led us to a home church that we love. I mean, come on. I'm blown away when I think
Mhm.
of how good the Lord has been to us thus far. And, that giving us things to look at and look back on. And, we don't, because the enemy will say to me, well, if something bad happens, then, all that stuff was for nothing. All those signs and wonders and all those were for nothing. And I just have to that's something I fight with. I
Yeah.
struggle with that. I struggle with what are the next, what happens off treatment? What happens in March or March 1st? He ends treatment March 1st, which is
Oh,
3/1
wow.
on a Sunday. So the Trinity on a Sunday, which I love. I think it's so cool.
How are
But
you
I mean, what happened?
feeling about that? How are you feeling about oh gosh, I don't wanna we're human, and, but knowing and seeing God's hand in everything. I mean, everybody that's here listening, commenting, we can see God's hand in it, and then knowing that the treatment ends, March 1st, on a Sunday. Uh,
Yes.
where's Jace at now? How is he feeling? What are you and your husband's feelings and thoughts and emotions knowing that treatment ends March 1st? How are you feeling?
Well, right now we go monthly for lab checks, and they have to make sure that his dosing of his chemo is good, make sure he's tolerating everything, and make sure he's staying within a range where he's suppressed enough to fight off infections, but not basically they don't want to suppress him too much, but they can't have his immune system going crazy either, and then they have to up the chemo. And so far, we started maintenance in December. And so far, they have not had to tweak the chemo. He's been in the sweet spot range, right where they want him. He's doing fantastic. But, there is a thought of, once we stop this chemo, what's going to happen? I mean, every little bump, every little bruise, every little runny nose, every little mood change, for the rest of our lives. There's never a time that the doctors are going to be able to tell us this will never come back. There's
Mm,
just never a time. And that's where the Lord that's where he comes in, and he has to be the one to show me these things. And there's been plenty of times when I'm like, Lord, I'm in Facebook groups, and I've met tons of great friends going through the same thing. But I will tell you one thing, being in these Facebook groups, it is very negative. It is
mm,
terrifying. And although I've met really good friends in there, it's also, I call it where worry goes to thrive. It's a spiral central. You just see awful things and hear awful things and hear about, the side effects and things that could happen. So all during treatment, I was in this group, and there's a group called, once you graduate and you're done treatment, there's a group called Off Treatment, Now What? And I was, in there just looking to spiral, basically. And
yeah.
I felt the Spirit say, off treatment, now who?
Mm,
And as soon as, and I knew it was a thought from God, because you recognize my,
Yes.
my beep, hear my voice, when it's him, So I unfollowed that group
Mm,
immediately. And because you have to know who, right? Like, cause we don't know what none
right.
of us know what, and we all live in this, we live like we have 100 years,
Mm,
and we live like we know what's going to happen, and we have a false sense of security that everything's going to be fine. And you were saying, earlier when we were questioning, why is this happening to us? Why us? And I really do feel, I told my husband, I'm like, I think it's because he knows I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm like, I think that's why. Because I made a promise to the Lord in the beginning of this. I was like, if you bring us through this, I will tell any and everybody that will listen, that what you've done for
mm,
us. And man, I mean, it just brings me to tears. It really does.
yes.
How faithful he's been in every aspect. My husband and I, we were on the brink of divorce.
Mm,
We really were. I mean,
mhm,
this will try you. This will try you in every sense of the word. We didn't talk for, basically had no conversation for months. He couldn't
mm,
sleep. I couldn't sleep. And we were surviving. I mean, he took
yeah.
6 months off of work. We were quarantining like it was COVID all over again,
Mm,
and Jace would get a fever. We have to run to CHOP every single time he gets a fever. And that was happening every 10 days. He was getting a fever. And there was a point where I was praying to the Lord. This was the second month of treatment. I said, I can't take this anymore. In my journal, I was like, I can't. This was the first 2 months of treatment. I said, I just can't do this anymore. I was like, I can't.
mhm,
I'm at my wit's end, and I can't go to CHOP anymore. We were staying home, and we would go to the hospital, and they'd send us home. They'd say, his counts are fine. Everything's elevated, go home. And we would come home and have to go back, come home, go back. And there was one night where, and this ties music into it as well, because the one night Jace had 102 fever. We'd just gotten back from the ER. And I said, I'm not giving him any more Tylenol. I said, he just had Tylenol. It was like 102 point something. His heart rate was, 135, and he had a clear fever. And I just was over it. I was over
yeah.
it. And Jace laid down in bed, and because he sleeps with us, in between us. And Jace said, Mommy, can you put on the Jesus song? And he meant In Jesus' Name by Katie Nicole. And I said, sure, buddy. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. So I put that on. I put that song on, followed by a Kari Jobe song. And I turned over to go to sleep, and I felt his body, and his body felt cool. And I felt his forehead, and his forehead was not dripping with sweat, nothing. So I got my Apple Watch, and I checked his heart rate, because his heart rate's always high when he has a fever. It was normal. Ran, got the thermometer, a normal 98.9. It was normal. And this was over the course of about 7 minutes with the worship song playing over his head. And I just was in shock. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the Tylenol, I said, it'll be back tomorrow. It'll be back next week. This was last March, and he has not had a fever since.
My
That was it.
goodness.
That night, the Lord said, that's it. It's done. And he responded to my son asking for a worship song. And, to play a worship song. Like, the Lord responded to him. And it was the only moment where that was a tangible moment where I knew that was God. This happened right now. And I saw it with my own eyes. It wasn't something I thought. I saw it. There was no sweat on his forehead. And I couldn't believe that it just didn't come back. It didn't come back. And I really do. I mean, that's why I love worship. I love it.
Mm.
It's my passion. I love, love singing, and I love worship music, and how the Lord has just opened doors and, included that in our journey is just, it blows my mind. It really does.
I mean, my mind is blown and it's overwhelming. A lot of times people, you hear people say, I wish Jesus would just reveal himself more, but the glimpses that he gives us, it is overwhelming. I think, if there were more, I don't know what would happen. I don't know, but I feel like I would be a puddle because it is overwhelming. It is even with you talking and sharing, the temperature and then your baby asking for he wants to hear a Jesus song, and then it's gone, and, like, that's overwhelming to me, overwhelming goodness, and, it's hard to speak. But,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna read a couple of more, comments, and you spoke of worship, and we are so, um just excited. I'm so excited. Some of my guests may not know, or some of my, subscribers may not know, but, Ashley's gonna sing a song for us, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear. But let me go through here. Echoes and Embers says, "The fact that you went through all of this and you're here saying, 'I am still his child,' is the biggest glory you can give him in return, and so inspiring."
I
Oh
love
my
that.
goodness. Me too. Let's see here. Psalm 118:17 was, Christy Betts' go-to scripture when she was very ill. Other people saying they love elevation worship and just
Chills.
chills throughout your story. Echoes and Embers says, "I think we forget that it's okay and he understands. He just wants you to come with him with
Yep.
it."
Yep. And he can handle our temper tantrums. I had so many temper tantrums. Let me tell you, oh man, it was it was rough. It was rough, and there were times I'd go in the shed where where I kept my speakers and stuff, and I would just scream,
Mm,
scream because I was so angry, so angry. But he can handle it. He handles it. He knows how to handle us, and thank God that he forgives us, and he doesn't let you go too far without reeling you back in. He really does. The Lord knows what he's doing. He
yes.
orchestrates things. He and what's that saying where you learn forward or you understand backwards or something like that? Like
Yeah, yeah, and
the-
it is so true. It is so true, but the good news is that we, everyone that's listening, everyone,
I
that goes
agree.
through these trials and tribulations, you can look back and you can see the promise of the Lord, and so you can move forward knowing he's there with me. He's not doing these things to me, to us, he is with us, and,
Right.
so journaling and going back and reading, wow, that's where I was so long ago, the death of a child, our son, in the midst of it, I know that God was there. I know God was there in the midst of it. In the midst of it, though, there were times when I was very angry and then trying to drink and numb those, uh,
Yep.
excruciating feelings that you think, "I cannot go through this. I cannot feel this. I don't wanna feel this." And then the
Right.
Lord says, through our son, was like, "Okay, you need to stop trying to numb, and you're gonna feel this, and I'm gonna be with you, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
make something beautiful out of this." And so here we are, we get to share how good God is, and even after our hardships, our trials, and our tribulations. Um, so a lot of people, just great support. The story you will tell testifying of God's goodness, that is so true. What an amazing story. Okay, and you shared that you, love to worship and that you love to sing, Ashley, and you guys, I have had the honor of hearing, some snippets of Ashley singing, and boy, I'll tell you what, there was one song that she sang that, I was crying. I had never heard it. It may not be one that she's singing tonight that you're singing tonight, but, you think about Mary and her baby, and then you think about as a mother what she went through, and it's hard to talk
Yeah.
about. I don't think I can speak, but, and then you think of men and women that go through these trials and tribulations, and you think of how the goodness of God. And Ashley sang and shared some snippets of it, and she's going to sing a song with us tonight, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear it. You might want to get your Kleenex because you can just feel the Lord's presence through your voice. Ashley, you have such a gift, and I appreciate you for sharing with us. So I'm going to let you explain the song that you are going to sing, and then just take it away.
Yeah, I don't know how the sound is going to work, so I apologize if it's too loud or anything. Tried to set it up the best I could, but the song I heard when I took my son to see the King of Kings movie, and it was at the very end. It's at the credits, and the lyrics were so good. It's basically saying that, anything's possible when you believe. And it's just how the chorus is, I want to live like that. I want to live with no fear. I want to see things through a lens of positivity and through God's lens. So I absolutely love this song. It's called I Want to Live Like That. And I will get it set up and I will sing it for you. And I hope you enjoy.
Thank you.
See if I can. You're welcome. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to get this to work here.
Of course.
Okay.
A childlike faith is all it takes for a miracle. And God, I pray you wash away my cynical. Let worry give way to wonder. Let my soul dare to dream that nothing is impossible if you believe. I wanna live like that. I wanna go back to that place of seeing more good than bad. Back when I wasn't so afraid to let love lead the way, live day by day and not look back. And I wanna live like that. Look through the eyes that look at life as one big adventure. Look through the eyes that look at life as one big adventure. And I don't want to miss a moment. Let my fear turn to faith. And I don't want to miss that moment. Let my fear turn to faith. Let it fly like wings of eagles that dance through the rain. I want to live like that. I want to go back to that place. I see more good than bad. Back when I wasn't so afraid to let love lead the way, live day by day and not look back. And I want to live like that. And I want to live life knowing I'll never be alone. And freedom comes the moment I let go. I want to live like that. And I want to live like that.
sentence. Oh dear. I'll finish it.
Yeah.
I surrender all to thee, my precious Savior. I surrender all, and I wanna live like that, and I wanna live like that. He died so I could live like that.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Hey, that's okay. It's beautiful acapella and just gorgeous, gorgeous. And Ashley, you are such a beautiful being inside and out. And we so appreciate you sharing your personal story, but giving God the glory. And we could see and feel God all throughout your testimony. And that's what it's all about. And prayers for you and your family and for Jace for after March 1st, that we don't have to worry about that anymore because God's got him.
Yes. March 1st. March 1st.
So everyone is saying, awesome, beautiful. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Amen. Glory be to God. And I always ask my guests one question. And it's a question I ask everyone. After you have been through everything that you've been through, everything, your ups, your downs, your walk away from faith, your unity, the illness with your son, the thoughts of ending your life, a marriage almost ending. Now Jace is on the road to healing, and your marriage is, I'm sure, is going well now, and you guys are going to your church. And after everything that you have been through up till now, today, who would you say that Ashley is today? Who are you today? Who are you today, Ashley?
I am multiple things. I am grateful. Sometimes I'm angry. But most of all, I am someone who is fortunate enough now to have seen the glory of God so many times over. So many times over, I've seen him do miracles. I've seen him pull us through. I've seen him be there for me and love me when I didn't love myself. I've seen him redeem situations that I thought weren't redeemable. So I'm forever changed by this experience. I really am, and I look through the lens of life very differently now, and little things that most of us take for granted with our kids and our spouses and our just everyday life. We're not guaranteed any of this. Like anything that we receive is a blessing. Every day that we have is a blessing. And we need to use the time that we have here to tell other people the goodness of the Lord, and to our stories are what help others come to Christ. I mean, to hear people go through things like your story and come out the other side. I mean, there's nothing that the enemy hates more than that, right? Like if he's trying to drag us down and keep us there.
Right.
But luckily the Lord doesn't leave us in the pit for long, and he sends people. And like we were saying earlier, like the God winks and things, like when you feel like he's not there, he's there. And really just keep on pressing in. There were so many times where I'm like, Lord, where are you? Where are you? I mean, where are you? Because
Yes.
sometimes he feels very distant and very silent. And, and if you ask him, show up, show yourself, you know what I mean? Like, show yourself to me. I need something. I need your presence. I need you to give me something. He is faithful to do so. He does so every time. Not right away, sometimes not the way you expect it. But I'll tell you what, I refuse to let cancer define our family. And I also believe that the prayers of my grandparents, they were Sunday school teachers, and they were avid prayers. And I believe that the Lord is faithful through the generations too. And my grandfather passed before my grandmother, and my grandmother passed on Christmas Eve, which I thought was so crazy that, we were given the tragedy, but also, given that steroid on Christmas Eve as well.
Yeah.
And I really do, believe in the power of prayer. And, long after we're gone, our kids and our future generation are going to, reap the benefits from our prayers. I can't help but think that the Lord is honoring that for generations to come. So, I am a believer more than ever now, but it doesn't negate the fear that I have.
Right.
It really, and I want to make that completely clear that, you don't just, come to the Lord and believe and feel great all the time. You just don't. And that fear is something I battle with every single day. But, I'd rather be in the fire with the Lord any day than leave it to, myself to figure it out, because I will not. I can't do it on my own. I can't.
Amen.
We can't. None of us can.
At all. And you're right. Everyone has a story, and everyone that comes on and shares it and shares the goodness of Christ. We pray. I pray all the time. And that's the whole premise behind, that's the purpose of this podcast. It was God-led. I am was never a radio show person. And there I was someone said, "Hey, you need to come on the radio." And I'm like, okay, God, here we go. And so God is the reason, He's behind this. And the more people that I can bring on to share their story, they are the ones that can impact others by sharing their story. I can't tell your story and impact others the way that you can. And so it is true. And that's the premise and the purpose. And I'm so glad that you came on and you joined me. A couple of other little comments before we go. From Pretty and Pooch, thank you, Ashley. Give little Jess a little ruffle on his head. You all are in our prayers.
Thank
Christy
you.
Betts says Psalm 118:17, I shall not die, but live and declare the works of the Lord.
I love that. I love that.
Victory in Jesus. Yes, amen.
Yeah, and my church's name is Victory, too. Victory Bible Church. Yeah.
I love it. Well, listen, guys, I thank you guys so much for coming and watching and supporting. And Ashley, again, I thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, your rawness, your realness, your transparency, and the beauty of God and how good He is. Even in the midst of our trials and tribulations, He is there. So I hope you guys all have a good night. Again, thanks, Ashley, for coming on. Thank you guys for coming to support. And I hope you guys have a blessed rest of your week and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you. We'll see you guys next week. Bye, y'all.